If they don't eat dinner with you at the dinner table when you've got guests, they are not family. If you are traveling around the world and you're going to London and Dubai and everywhere and you don't take them with you, they are not family. Because if you're taking your kids, then if you're saying this is family, then the family should go with you. So we have to do better. In a nutshell, that's
Yeah,
all it is.
yeah.
We have to have, like I said, we've got to have empathy and compassion. Where has this person come from? What are they doing? And don't get me wrong, and I think that people misunderstand and I get pushed back. We have good employees and good employers, but rightly so, we also have bad employees and bad employers.
This is Salam and Hello, where stories of joy and justice vibrate with the rhythm of Africa and the diaspora.
We're worried, anxious group of people trying to move along. Maybe one day we'll get onto something. Until then, we say, hold on.
Salam and hello, everyone. My name is Lilly Piper, and welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here. Before we get started on today's episode, I'm doing my weekly call out to ask you to help us grow the show and share the love. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Apple or Spotify, hit that follow button. If you're listening to us on AfriPods or elsewhere, please share the show, like it, leave us a review. It really, really helps us every single time that you do. Okay, so we have started a fantastic new series, I think it's fantastic, called The Case for Hope. And every week we're going to examine something in our lives that I think we could have a lot more hope about. And today's topic is near and dear to my heart, but also I would say probably every single person who lives on the continent, in Asia, elsewhere in the world's heart as well, because we're going to be talking about the case for domestic workers. When we first immigrated back to Ethiopia, or I don't know if you call it immigration when you return back home, but I think you do, almost 18 years ago, we had just had our fourth child. So our youngest was 6 weeks, our twins were 2.5, and our oldest was 4 years old. And we were in graduate school at the time, and we had gotten an opportunity to come to Ethiopia, do some research for 2 years. My husband Ben was finishing his PhD. I had just finished my master's. And so we were like, let's go back home, spend a couple of years there. And fortunately, it's worked out for us to continue to stay on the continent ever since. But at the time that we left, we were tired people. Like I said, we had four kids under four. We were in school, so we were working and raising our kids and in school. So life was hectic. And such that even we were on government food stamps in school because we lived below the poverty line in Massachusetts. We barely earned anything. We were living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we really relied on our friends and our family to make it week to week. We had some friends who would watch the kids for us when we were in class because we really couldn't afford babysitting. We had family who came up on weekends to help us when we had a lot going on, and our kids sometimes had some significant medical needs. They would come up and help us for that. My mom, when my twins were born, she was making food for them because they had all these allergies. She would make food in these little packets, freeze them, and then send them overnight just to help us out because it was hectic. We needed help, and we really relied on our family and friends. So when we moved to Ethiopia, we really were looking forward to so many things. I was looking forward to, bunna, coffee every day. I was looking forward to the smell of, afar and dorowet in the streets. I was looking forward to the smell of shuro. I was looking forward to being near family and cousins. I was looking forward to being back home. And if I'm honest, I was also very much looking forward to having help in our house. We needed help. Our kids were young. We were tired and overwhelmed. My mom was gracious enough to look for a house for us before we left, our place to live, a house, apartment. She looked at a bunch of places. And when she found a place for us, we were thrilled. And she met a young woman who had been basically, looking after the house while it was vacant. When she met this young woman, she found her basically in the storage area, the kind of what people call the SQ, servants' quarters or staff quarters. She did not have a full bed. She was on a mattress. She was eating just the bare minimum daily because she really didn't have a salary. She had basically pocket money. Can't even call what she had a salary. that the landlord had hired her just to look out for this house, but had left her with almost nothing. The power wasn't on because she didn't want to pay the power bill, so she was living by candlelight at night. She was alone. It was horrible. And my mom was so just upset by that. And, we decided that, let's interview her, see if she can work for us. And truly, Toada changed our life. She started working for our family as a nanny. As I said, my daughter was 6 weeks old when we arrived. She had some medical needs. My young older boys had some medical stuff going on. She was the saving grace of our family and our life. And from the day we arrived in Ethiopia to the day we left, Toada and then later a young man named Awaka worked with our family, blessed us, served us, and took care of us in a way that I will forever be grateful. And we're still in touch to this day. We owe so much of not only our personal families, lives, and well-being to domestic workers, but really the economy of the continent. The IMF reports that about 60% of workers in Africa are in the informal sector. And the World Bank says if you look at just urban areas, it's more like 80% of the informal sector is led by the informal sector. That's a huge part of our continent that is dependent on the work and the services of domestic staff, be it gardeners, be it nannies, be it, house managers. We depend on the domestic working staff to run the world, to run our places, to run our homes. And it's time that we do better by them. We have somebody on the show today who has really thought deeply about this issue, who has thought about how can we do better by domestic workers? How can we serve them better? How can we support them? And she believes so much in it that she's written a book called Good Housekeeping Africa. So in this series where we're talking about the case for hope, today's topic is the case for domestic workers, and I am talking to Wangeci Kamau. Wangeci is the founder of Good Housekeeping Africa, an organization that's dedicated to empowering both domestic workers and employers. She is a professional who's had over 20 years of experience in HR, focusing on performance and leading teams across diverse industries like IT, finance, telecom, and she's worked all over the world, both in Kenya, Asia, Europe, and the United States. Wangeci's book, Good Housekeeping Africa, came to my attention a couple months ago, and I've been following her work on social media. And I'm blown away by somebody who has given so much time and effort to help teach employers how to be better employers. And if they do that, then the working conditions, the pay, the rights of domestic staff will also improve. And when that improves, everybody will be lifted. So I'm really delighted to have Wangeci join me today on Salam and Hello. Wangeci, Karibu Sana. I'm so happy you're here.
Hi, Lily. How are you?
It's good to see
Good to
you.
see you as well. It was, thank you so much for the introduction. It was so good to meet you finally after I haven't met you or seen you for such a long time. When we
Yeah.
met through mutual friends a long time ago, only to find out that your cousin was my classmate, in high school. So, as you say, it's 2 degrees of separation.
Yes, yes. In fact, I feel like you've given me some street cred. I always say Nairobi's home when people look at me sideways, but now you've verified. When you have a cousin who went to school with a Wangeshi, you're local. And big love and shout out to Zeb and Christy and Nathan
Yes,
who, created this web for us to find ourselves in
yes,
today.
can you believe that?
I tell you. So Angeshi, start us off by telling us, what inspired you to start Good Housekeeping Africa? What was the motivation behind this initiative? And in particular, is there a story that sticks out in your mind that made you think, I gotta work on this issue?
Um, I would say that this has always been something that I've thought about for a long time. I don't typically like the way households treat domestic workers. I always say to people that I'm coaching, or even say to my friends and family, I say that, you don't sweat the small stuff. We take things for granted, and we take things, we automatically assume that somebody knows how to do something, but if, they didn't teach you,
True.
or if you didn't teach them, then how are they gonna know that that's the way they're supposed to use a blender or a washing machine, or, any of those things? And the thing that I always say as well is that, my mom taught me how to tie my shoelace. If she didn't teach me that, I wouldn't know. So I started thinking about it more and more, and interesting enough it was during the lockdown, because what do you call it? I was in a country, I wasn't in Kenya, I was in another country where we had a real lockdown where we couldn't get out of our houses. We could only like walk around the
Wow.
garden to get, to get some form of exercise. And I remember the fact that I didn't have my domestic worker coming, and I kept thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I'm spending my time in the kitchen because at the time I was living, with my brother as well. And so it was just the two of us, but I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm, doing laundry, and we didn't have a washing machine at the time. So I kept thinking to myself, man, let me tell you, we really, this is not for me. I don't mind the cooking and the cleaning, but when it comes to laundry, that's just, that's not my area of expertise. So,
That's not your
no,
ministry.
it is not. That's not the hill that I want to die on. So I started thinking about it more, and I started going through, YouTube, and I started looking at the videos as well. And you know what? During this time as well, there was a lot of information that was coming back about the girls, and for the purposes of this, I'm going to keep referring to the girls or the ladies simply because 76% of domestic workers are women. And you're also going to hear me talk about communication a lot. And so I
Thank
started,
you.
there was a lot of information coming back about the ladies who go to foreign countries and they're not coming back and they disappear, or they come back and, unfortunately they're coming back in a coffin, etc. And, I thought to myself, it filled me with so much sadness that this can happen, that, we have so many people or who are looking for better lives, and that's why we go to foreign countries to go and look for a better life, to be able to help our family. It's something that we all know about, especially in the African community, when it comes to black tax, which we're starting to talk about a
Yes.
lot. So I said to myself, okay, how do we help these ladies who are going, and these things are happening? And then I said, but before I do that, I've seen the same things happen right here on our continent. So how do we change that? How do we first start tackling what we have, what is going wrong with our continent, before we take it outside? So literally that's what I started doing, and I started to do the research, and I started reading, and the more I read and the more I spoke to people and I did surveys, and the sadness, my family always laughs because that we are two in our family that are the most emotional, and we cry a lot over small things. Unfortunately, the other person was my sister, who passed away a few years ago, and so we're known as the criers. So when I started to do the research and I'm watching all these videos, I would cry, and I would hear the stories when I'm speaking to domestic workers and to employers when they give me their story. But I've toughened up a little bit, and I decided that, what, I can do something about it. Just one step at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time.
Thanks for that, Wangeshi. And, my heartfelt condolences on the loss of your sister. We hold her in our
Thank
hearts.
you.
I'm really touched by this idea, what you said about, this is familiar, seeing those young women leaving the continent for looking for a better life and being like, but wait a minute, this is
Yeah.
familiar. So I'm curious to know, when you start to tackle a problem that is both global in scale or global in scope and also
Yeah.
locally familiar, where do you start? Because you work with employers and you work with household staff, and so where did you begin?
You know, it, it's not even a conversation that I hadn't had. One of my closest friends, because my background is human resources, and she said, you've done training for us, you've done training for companies all over the world, etc. Don't you think that maybe what you need to do is you need to go ahead and, train and coach domestic workers? And I said, and I pushed back, and I still push back to this day because she still thinks I should do that. I said to her, but I think that as employers, we are part of the problem. And somebody, because nobody, and I researched everywhere, nobody has tackled the fact that we are part of the problem. I would say we're 50, even up to 60% as employers. And so that's why I decided to
Yes.
tackle the side of the employers, because I could shout from the mountaintop and I could talk to every domestic worker and tell them, these are your rights. I'm going to advocate for you. But if I don't have an employer buy-in for them to understand the reasons why maybe things are not working at home, the reason you don't have home balance, the reason why, your life around you is suffering is because, you don't have home balance. So that's why I decided that I needed to tackle the employers, because there is quite a lot of people who actually tackle, the training of domestic workers and telling them and advocating for them and telling them. So it doesn't mean that I don't advocate for both. I just want to create a harmonious and functional environment where we're not always nitpicking at each other, because as long as I can remember, we're always complaining about each other, but we need each other.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to something you said earlier about, if your mom hadn't taught you to tie your shoes, you wouldn't know. If someone doesn't teach somebody how to use a piece of equipment, they won't know. And it strikes me that a lot of employers, myself included, who hire household staff to help them. When my kids were growing up, we had a nanny,
Yes.
we had someone help us with cooking,
Yes.
we had a driver. So we had at least three.
Yes.
Sometimes we had four because we had a garden. So we were employing a lot of people. And I think I never had training as an employer. I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
So there's some things that you assume because someone's in your home, you know how to do it. You know how to engage.
Yes.
But I had no idea. I was coming from, government support systems in
Right.
the U.S.
Right.
to now employing, start two people. So, when you think about the teaching of employers, where do you start with them? Like, what's your top two things? And I'll just add to this because on this side, as an employer only, I've not worked as a household staff member. I've worked my whole life, but not in that capacity. I usually feel a lot of anger
Yes.
because I look around and I see how poorly people are treated, or they're making tea at 9 p.m. There's no days off.
Yes.
And then I can turn the mirror and look at myself and say, whoa, you have not been perfect either, my dear.
Right.
So where did you start when you thought about, okay, I need to talk to employers? What was priority one for you when you started that support and that coaching?
Priority one for me was to actually write a book and put it in writing, which is what I did. I wrote a book. The book is called How to Manage Domestic Workers, the Employer's Guidebook. And so I spent about 3 months writing that, and what I poured into the book was things that I would have liked to know, when I first started employing, because the first time I employed a domestic worker, I think I was 23 or 24 years old. And I didn't know anything from
Wow.
Adam. We all know because we've
Yeah.
learned from our parents, our mothers especially, or our grandmothers. So I said to myself, what would I want to know if I was now going to employ, and this is my first time to employ. So what I did is that there are three aspects that I wanted to look at, and that was how to recruit a domestic worker, how to hire a domestic worker, and how to retain. Because we do have some people have revolving doors where I've literally spoken to people and they're like, I've had 6 domestic workers in 1 year, and I'm like, okay, then there seems to be a problem, and this is the way that we need to tackle.
The problem is
Yeah, the
you.
problem is
I'm
you.
sorry,
I
right?
don't want to say it.
Because I've seen that
I
too.
don't want to say it, but I mean, if you've had 6 domestic workers or even 12 domestic workers in 1 year, then there's a problem, and I think the problem is you. But you have to be, you have to look at it that even us, we're educated, we've gone to school, we know what we're supposed to do with the right thing, etc. But we also base everything on assumptions. I'm assuming because you worked somewhere else before you came to work with me that you're gonna know how I want to do this. I could give you 5 ingredients and I could take 5 ingredients, but the way you cook and the way I cook is gonna be totally different, and we have the same ingredients. So I wanted to do that. So what I did is that in the book, it gives you, like a checklist, and the checklist talks about things like how you're going to onboard, because it's very important. I basically would like to
Yeah.
change the way we see domestic workers and make it more professional. So the same way if you're going into a white collar job, you have onboarding. I remember I was working in the US, and one job, it took me like a month of onboarding. The other one took like 3 months of
For
onboarding.
sure.
And they teach you everything that you need to know. So I think it's very important for an employer to be able to onboard. And I do get pushback where people are like, "But there's so many people who come here. I've employed so many people." I'm like, "Yeah, but if you onboard the first time, the right time, then I don't think you're going to have a revolving door, because all it is, it's about communication." And so when you have onboarding, I also have a checklist that shows you this is what the person's supposed to do weekly. This is what they're supposed to do monthly. This is what they're supposed to do quarterly as well. And on top of that, because I've been getting a lot of people who actually call me or inbox me and say, "Okay, do you train domestic workers?" And I said, "No, I don't train domestic workers." So what I've actually done is I've actually written another book, guiding hands on how to train your domestic worker. And in fact, it's free to download it from my website. You can go ahead, and it gives
Fantastic.
you everything you need to know, room by room, so that you're not going to be overwhelmed. Because they're working moms, single parents, couples, who also don't even have
Sure.
domestic workers but would like to get it, but they're like, "Where do I even begin?" So for me, it was very important for you to be able
Yeah.
to do that. That if you say you're going to an agency, what questions should you ask the agency? What questions should you ask the person that you're going to interview as well? And you should have a day where this person, if you've narrowed it down to two, take a Saturday, and say, "Okay, today I want you to come and work, and I want to see how you work," so that we know where we are going from there.
It's what you said, so many important things, because I'm just struck by the fact that you're right. The onboarding process is important, and maybe that would reduce some of both the revolving door, but most importantly, the inequity. Because for me, there seems to be so much classism that filters into the poor treatment of staff.
Yes.
And if you had mutual respect, you would onboard somebody just like you would at the
Yes.
office, as you would in your home. Especially if you think this person is dealing with your kids,
Yes.
person is dealing with your food, your belongings. Why wouldn't you invest that time? So tell me, it seems to be like it's not easy, but you can teach someone. Here's a way to onboard, right? Here's, like you said, you wrote two books, you've written checklists. It's hard to teach somebody the moral and ethical
Yes.
behaviors that they should have. So how are you tackling that? Because that to me seems to creep in, and we just have to say, in our African context, you see it way more, I feel like at times, or on the surface more. I think the West has learned how to hide it and package it differently,
Yes.
but it's just on the surface here,
Yeah.
how do you tackle that?
I'm not gonna lie, it's been tough. It's actually difficult, because change management. Just like if you're in a white collar job, change management. When you get a change management
Yeah.
company that comes into the company, and that means downsizing and everything. So, change is hard. Even for me, there's certain things that I'm just thinking, no, I don't want to do that. So it's been difficult, but I'm not giving up. I'm taking, and there are days I feel like, okay, this is too much. I'm not going to do this. But it just takes one person. You know, the coaching classes that I've had, you can see sometimes the light bulb moment, like, aha, okay, so this is what this means. And you have to take one person at a time so that you can change the mindset and say, okay, listen, you've had 3 domestic workers, you've had 6 domestic workers. What do you feel is the problem? And I get pushback where people say, no, they don't listen to me. I said, but how do you talk to them? Are you talking down at them? Are you talking to them like as an equal? Or, the different ways that you're going to communicate. It's very important for you to be able to do that. But if you're going to come into the house and you're shouting, one analogy I like to give is that if you're going into a new relationship, say you've been in a relationship before, and we're always told that when you go into a new relationship, don't take your baggage from the past relationship, right?
Right,
This is new.
right,
This is a new person, right?
right.
So if you're gonna hire a new person, why are you taking the baggage of the old person because of what they did or didn't do into the new one? So the little stories that I give, and the little aha moments that I give, I think that's what's been changing the mindset of the people that I've been fortunate enough to coach thus far.
So help us have like a cheat sheet, so to speak, this morning.
Hmm.
Let's say, people are going, Easter's coming up. let's say people are going to be together and see family, and for sure you might see, that worker who's been helping your family since you were little, maybe you're going home
Yes.
and you're at Easter dinner, or you're at Eid. Eid is also coming up. You're at Eid and you're enjoying family time. What's some messages we can start putting out there to help shift the mindset? Because to be honest with you, I will never be able to get rid of how I met Toada years ago when we first met her. And she had been living, honestly, in almost squalor under the previous landlord. And then by the time we left, like, she had gained weight.
Yes.
She was, vibrant. She, all these things that I didn't know she could do by the time we left 4 years later. And we're still in touch to this day.
Yes.
And I'm definitely not saying we did it perfect. I'm just saying that because I was coming from the US,
Yes.
where your rights and your human rights, your dignity, your employee rights were so clear to me. I had never lived in Africa yet.
Right.
So I came at it at a different point. So when we're at Eid, when we're at Easter,
Yes.
what are some things we can start to put into the conversation with our moms, our grandmothers, our fathers, to improve the lives of those people who really make our lives possible?
I think that the way I do it, and I've been, I always say that, I put a survey the other day on my social media, and I say, which generation do you believe is the worst employer, generation, etc. I
I
would
know.
say, unfortunately, around here, etc. I would say baby boomers were, they were tough, man. They were tough.
Yeah.
Um, I started having the conversation literally with my friends and with my family, and we have the conversations about, if your domestic worker has been with you for 20 years, what is their retirement plan? Where do they go from there? And some of my friends kind of looked at me like, I'm not sure. That's got nothing to do with me. And I'm like, they've given you the best years of your life. If somebody came to you and they're 24 and they're now 44, if they needed to retire, you want to retire them by the time they're 50, don't you think you should have a plan for them, a savings plan? I have somebody who I know, a friend of mine, who they've saved together, they've bought land together, she's put up a house together, so that when she leaves, I believe it's next year, in the next couple of years, that she doesn't have to go back to work. So when we start having these conversations and saying, you know what, we've always had this narrative in Africa that a lot of people earn $1 a day. And that's been the narrative for so long. Why can't we get to $2 a day or $3 a day, $4 a day? And the only people who can change that is us. It's our continent that can change that. And I also tell people that they need to stop looking as if the problems, and we do have problems between employers and domestic workers, it's not a Kenya problem or an Africa problem, it's a worldwide problem. So when we start having these conversations like, okay, she's going to leave me at one point, what is she going to leave me with? And, like when we go to a job, we are told about the glass ceiling. Maybe she came to work for you, and after 3 years, guess what? She saved enough money that she wants to try something on her own. You shouldn't try to stop her or be angry with her or refuse to give her references because she wants to go. She wants a better life. She wants to maybe get married, have children, and maybe she already has some of those things, but she wants to spend more time with them. So the conversation starts off with, you need to have better pay, you need to have better working conditions. I've been to places where I've seen, a domestic worker sleeps in the store, or they lock their domestic worker when they leave on Sunday, they leave them in the store and they lock them in the store. I mean, the inhumanity just for me, and like I said,
Oh
that's
my
why
goodness.
it used to make me, shed tears because I can't understand. If you're working for me as Wangeci, me, what I eat is what you're gonna eat. I don't sweat the small stuff. Now, I always tell somebody when they first start working for me that the kitchen, that's my piece. I love to cook, I love to be in the kitchen, etc. Please don't break my stuff in my kitchen. You can take anything else, but don't break the stuff in my kitchen. But even if you do, I'm not gonna sweat it. I'm not gonna deduct your pay because you broke a glass. Now, if it gets to the point where you're breaking 10 glasses a week, then we have a problem. Maybe you shouldn't be in my kitchen. But it's those kind of conversations and saying, this lady is like you. And again, for the purposes of this, because 76% of domestic workers are women, don't you want this woman to have a better life as well? She doesn't want to be a domestic worker all her life. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword because we don't consider it like a profession. and it should be. Look at
Exactly.
the
Yeah,
Western world where if you want a full-time domestic worker, you're going to have to pay for it. We're talking 60, $70,000 a year. So when do
absolutely.
we begin to, it's one person at a time where we start to change and have a shift where we say, why can't this be why can't this be a professional job as well, where they
Yeah,
have better
yeah,
wages, better working conditions, fair labor, and all of those different things?
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate every piece of what you're saying, that really the solution is within us to improve the GDPs of our country,
Yes.
much less the working conditions of the people in our home and in our lives. You've mentioned women a couple of times now, and I really appreciate that you continue to center them in this conversation because, as you said, the data shows us that a majority of women, a huge majority, 80%, is it that you told me, that our domestic workers are
Yeah,
women?
76%. Yeah.
76%. So tell me a little bit about how the coaching that you're doing addresses those issues that really touch on women, child safety, like you said, kind of financial savings, those things that are really critical to their own well-being. How are you coaching people through some of those kind of tougher topics? And what are you hearing from employers? Because I'm curious to know, actually, are your employers, the people who are contacting you, are they mostly African?
Yes.
Are they expats? What are they?
They are mainly African. I've had a couple of
That's
expats
great to
ask
hear.
me, yeah, I've had a couple of expats asking me questions, but I believe also the expatriate community, they talk about these things like when you are coming, I'm sure, to Kenya, there's maybe some booklets, I believe, that they say this is what you should
Yeah,
do.
there are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. These are the, what you call it, domestic workers that have been verified, they've worked, 10 years, etc. So
Okay.
I think it's when it comes to child safety and having domestic workers in your homes, etc. I think that it also starts with you. You have to verify that the person who is working in your house is who they really say they are. It's not enough that somebody comes and gives you, an identification. It's not enough that somebody comes and gives you a certificate of good conduct. For the purposes of this, let's use Kenya because that's mainly where I
Sure.
coach. It's you need to know who's working in your house, um, because these are the people who you leave with your most prized possessions, which are your children. Most prized possession is not your 50-inch TV, it's your child. And
Yeah.
you need to know that this person as well is going to have the best interest of your child. So, when you're writing, you should write a job description and ask yourself, what is this, what is the education level of this person? What are they going to be able to teach my child? Are they going to do homework with my child? Are they going to do any of these things? But at the same time, also ask yourself, like, if you've brought in this person, what else can you do to elevate them? If they want to go to baking school, so it means that that in the next couple of years, this person is probably going to leave you, but guess what? You've actually elevated one more person. That's your CSR project.
Yeah.
And we all have CSR
Yeah.
projects, and you can actually say to yourself that this is what I want to be my CSR project is that my domestic worker who comes, so in my lifetime, I'm going to have 10 of them. And those 10, I'm going to know out of those 10, somebody is somewhere, is doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
talking to other people and telling them about what works and what doesn't work. So I think that within that, that's how we elevate people. And mostly, again, it's because it's women. And we want to get women out of poverty because they need to take care of their kids, they need to take care of their homes, they need to take care of their elderly parents. So, how do we do that? And so, talking, it helps.
Absolutely. I'm curious when you dial that down into the granular level and to think about just wages, for
Yes,
example, the data tells us that a majority of those in the informal sector are not getting that living wage. They're not even hitting the minimum wage. So keeping it in Kenya because that's where both you and I are right now,
yes,
but speaking to a global audience.
yes,
So most of our listeners are actually in the diaspora.
yes,
Some may have taken domestic workers with them
yes,
from, their home countries,
yes,
or they might just be next door in Tanzania or whatnot.
yes.
What does the law tell us about the protections for domestic workers around wages, around, like you said, retirement plans, health insurance? What does the law tell us? And then what are you seeing as the actual norm and the reality for most domestic workers?
I'm fortunate, or we're fortunate enough to live in a country where we do have minimum wage for domestic workers, and it's out there, a Fair Labor Act, etc., where it says that, domestic workers have to earn, this is the minimum that they need to earn, but they also have the rights just like anybody else who's working in an office. You've got maternity leave, you've got health care, you've got your days off, you've got leave, you've got all of those things which you're supposed to give the person. And I think that creates good harmony within a home, is because you are actually doing that. Now, on the ground, things are different. And it's not that I don't understand. And yes, I am pushing for, fair labor and all of the things that I've just mentioned. But you find somebody, we've got a lot of single parents. A single parent is maybe bringing home $300 a month, they've got a child, they've got to educate the child, but at the same time, they can't be a stay-at-home parent because they need to work. And so they need to hire somebody, unless, of course, they're living with relatives, friends who can take care of their children when they're not at home, or when they go to school and they come back at 3 o'clock and I'm still working, etc. So, excuse me. So things are different, and it's not that I'm extremely judgmental when it comes to me finding out that, you're not paying minimum wage. I'm not condoning it, but being in this continent, I understand it. What I don't understand is finding somebody who earns $100,000 a year and pays $50 a month, and won't give leave days,
Right.
etc. Then I become judgmental. But other times I work my way through, and I talk to people and I say, you've got to do right by them, because if it gets to the point where they can take you to court, and there is quite a few court cases, because you didn't do the right thing. And again, I'm not being judgmental and saying that, you have to do this, you do have to do that because it's the law. But again, I understand why sometimes some people are not able to do that.
I mean, Wangechi, we might understand and have empathy for somebody who, doesn't have the salary that I have or others. But again, I mean, I just think I'm still troubled by that, though. I know you don't want to be judgy, but I'm feeling judgy, quite honestly. Your thoughts, because I'm like, well, then maybe you can't afford a domestic worker. Maybe what you need to do is a job sharing situation, or I don't know. I mean, we have to start having these conversations and holding people accountable, because, when we moved to Ethiopia, I remember at that time, and things are really rapidly changing in Addis Ababa now. Now, if you ask people, they'll say there's a domestic worker shortage, and they're having a hard time finding young women in particular, like you said, because they're either leaving the country,
Yes.
or, and they don't want these jobs anymore. They don't want the jobs that you're offering them. They don't want to earn, 2,000 shillings per month, working, incredible hours. And that's fair. So maybe judge is too strong a word, but can we still demand more of all of us, no matter where we are? Because what's happening, I think, is that we're creating this pipeline
Yes.
to take any means necessary to try and get to Saudi Arabia or elsewhere. I don't know how. I know so many young women and children of our, other people I know, who have made that choice, and it's devastating.
Yes.
So aren't we just contributing to that pipeline when we don't do better?
We are. And, the conversation starts with, me going into a group setting, because my coaching sessions are usually a group setting, and I say to them, guys, this is the minimum wage. And then I give them court cases, and I say, look at this court case. This is what is happening out there on the ground, etc. And so you have to do better by that. But what I also encourage people is that if you know that you can't afford it, have a workaround plan. Like, have a relative who you've also vetted to make sure that this person is able to take care of your children. And we're talking mainly about people who have got children at home, young children, and also people who've got elderly parents and family members at home. Those are mainly the people that we talk about, because if you're single, or you're a couple and you don't have children yet, etc., you can manage that on your own, really, because you have one person who comes
Yeah.
to your house to do all of that stuff. But I always say, like in December when I was talking about this is the time when domestic workers go and don't come back, right? So I'm like, what's your plan A, your
Yeah.
B, your C, your D? How do you plan to do that? So if you've got, let's talk about if you've got children or elderly parents, etc., say, okay, I can't afford to have somebody full time, but can we share this load with other family members? So either we're going to put our resources together and pay this person what is their due, Or we're going to say that we can only afford to have this person 3 times a week, but the rest of the time, we have to have a family member that's going to come and take over and do these things, and or yourself, and say, I don't work Saturday and Sunday, and these are the days, these are my days that I'm going to be the caregiver for my kids and for the elderly
Yeah.
parents. But it starts with a conversation with one person, you know, and you start talking about it more. And I see conversations, I'm in these groups where I see conversations where literally almost every day somebody else is asking, what is the minimum wage? I can't quite find it, you know, when I Google it, etc. Because there is also a lot of conflicting information that is out there. But
But it's easy to find, right, Wangeshi? I mean, I remember at the end of, I think it was end of the year last year, the government, or maybe it was September, the government did release
yes,
the new targets for minimum wage, and it's easy to find. I'm not, you know, I found it, read it, made sure I was, you know, on par. It's not hard to find. I mean, I've gotten to the point in the groups I'm in where I don't share recommendations
yes,
anymore for people because I always know somebody who needs a job, and I'm tired of people, you know, reaching out to that person recently. Okay, sorry. You're going to serve as a
yes,
counselor. Um, so recently, someone was looking for a driver.
yes,
I knew somebody who was excellent,
yes,
friends who had left. So I sent his name to
yeah,
somebody I don't know, but we're in the similar same school community. So I trusted that their intentions were good.
yes,
They had him come. He was living outside of Nairobi. He came back to the city, rented a place for a month because they wanted to test out driving with him.
right,
That's fair. They did it for 1 week, two
yes,
weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
yes,
Then said, okay, great. Now he's incurred rent, of course, for the month.
yes,
They said, okay, we're happy to have you do it. They said, but can you start in September? We actually don't need you right now. And this man had come from upcountry, rented a
yeah,
place, and you know, now that he's being told we were September. And he was just so crushed by that. And he wrote to me and he's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, you know, I've taken out rent, I've come all this way. I thought I had the job,
yes,
and I do, but it's in September.
yes,
And these are, you know, one African, one European
yes,
couple.
yes,
And I just thought, you know better.
yes,
You know better.
absolutely.
um, I don't know. I guess I'm just venting to you at this point, but I'm like, in that situation, what should he have known maybe to demand?
Um, Again, I'm going to refer back to the book. What I've done in the book as well is
Please.
I've even written job descriptions where you can change the job description. So what I'm speaking to employers about is I'm like, have a clear communication by having a job description that this is what you're
Yeah.
going to do. This is when you're going to start. This is how much I am paying. And for the employers, because I still do get people calling me and saying, okay, I need to employ somebody. And I'm like, I don't do that. I don't recruit, but I do know people who do. But before I refer you over to them,
Yeah.
I need you to sign this document. And this document is saying that you've got, this is the job description. This is how much
Fantastic.
you're going to pay for it, this job, etc. There are working hours, and that you have to abide by the laws. Maternity leave, everything is there, and you have to do a checkbox and you have to initial it so that we know later down the line that this is what you committed to. But you know, also, Lily, people are desperate for work, so they don't want to ask the question they know they really should ask about. They're
Yeah.
not, when
Yeah.
they're told that this is going to be your job, and then later they find out, you know, you're washing the car, you're washing the dog, you know, you're cleaning the kids, yes, you're cleaning the house, and you're doing all of
Yeah.
these things, and you're in a household that has 5 bedrooms and 3.5 children, and you have to do all of these things, and you're one person, and it starts to breed contempt because both of you didn't
Yeah.
talk about this and it wasn't written down. You don't have a contract. And so you as a domestic worker start becoming bitter. And you as an employer also start becoming bitter because things are falling by the wayside. But that's because you put so much on this person's shoulders. But it's because we're not asking the questions, even as the domestic workers, and I keep telling them, ask the question, how much are you going to pay me? Can you please put it in writing? Am I allowed to take Sunday off? And you know, when the law says that it's a full 24-hour day, that doesn't mean that I come in on Sunday, unless I want to as a domestic worker. That doesn't mean that on Sunday I come make you breakfast and I have to be back at 6 o'clock to make you dinner on Sunday. No. Another thing I say is that, you know, ask them, do you want Sunday off or do you want Saturday? Because maybe they need to go to the hospital or maybe they need to do some of those other things and they are allowed a day off.
Absolutely.
So It starts with
Absolutely.
us, it's both of us, and that's why I'm saying that, we have to create home balance because it comes from both sides. We have to ask the tough question. And as a domestic worker, if I desperately need a job, I haven't worked for a year, I'm not going to ask those questions, but I should because it's going to hurt me later on
Yeah.
when it's not as it seems.
But that's why your work is so valuable because I think you're trying to fix those power imbalances by investing in the people who are actually holding all the power.
Yes.
Not that you're not investing in workers, but you are by making sure employers come at this correctly. Because if baby boomers were the generation that were the toughest, I think you and I are children of that generation, right?
Yes.
So we're one generation removed from
Yes.
a system where people had no rights, no recognition, no one talked about it, no one cared how you treated your staff at home.
Right.
Again, this is African context. We're the first generation to maybe try and now do it properly.
Yes.
And so I really appreciate that so much of what you're doing through a job description is restoring a power
Yes.
balance for domestic workers to understand clarity. And today I'm going to be sharing your resources with all the groups that I'm
No,
in
thank you.
where I've gotten this information. That's really, I mean, the case for hope.
Yes.
You are giving us hope because we can do this better. There are resources out there. You've created them for us.
Yes.
So, Wangechi, if we look to the future, if we're trying to forecast now to the next 10 to 15 years of labor in the continent, we know that there's some decent laws here in Kenya that provide some protections. There are people like you who are, raising the expectations and trying to get us to do better. But it still looks like we're going to depend on this informal sector for another 10 to 15 years.
Longer.
What should we see differently longer? What should we see differently if we're doing it right? If we start to improve how we treat our staff and we start to employ the tactics that you're guiding us to do through your book and through your work, what would change in our African context?
I think that we have to lead by example. Case in point, like the way you are going to, because there are other generations, the millennials, Generation Z, and the rest of the people.
A whole lot of Gen Z running around my
You know
house.
what I'm
Yes,
saying?
I
So
know.
Gen Z is also watching you, and Gen Z sees how you treat people. And if we want a better tomorrow, it has to start with us because we have to be a better example for the generations that come after us. We have to leave this continent better than we found it. And if that means that we're just going to do it with one person at a time, then that's what should happen, one person at a time. I remember watching Oprah, and one time somebody asked her, how do you feel about the fact that you can't help everybody, and knowing that you have this much wealth, etc. And I remember her
Yeah.
saying that, I don't feel bad about the ones that I can't help. I feel good about the ones that I can, and if I can help one person today, then that would be good. At least I can help one person today. And so, even though this, my role is actually coaching, fills me with happiness and that I'm changing the mindset, but it also fills me with sadness when I hear both sides of the stories
Yeah.
where, a domestic worker has ended the life of an employer or vice versa. And it happens. So
Yeah.
if we can also have empathy and compassion, we have to keep communication going. We have to keep communication going. And if we want a better tomorrow where, 20 years from now, yes, we're talking about the fact that a domestic worker is going to be earning $10,000 a year. We hope that. And I know somebody's thinking, $10,000 a year? They earn $60,000, but we got to start step by step, small steps. If we're earning a dollar,
Yeah.
$2 now, $10,000 is going to be a great way
Yeah.
to go 10 years from now, 5 years from now. So we also have to have, respect for diversity. And when you're having somebody who comes into your home, I always say that we know we don't treat them like family. And I think I had a reel last week on my social media platform where I was talking about if they don't eat dinner with you at the dinner table when you've got guests, they are not family. If you are traveling
Yeah.
around the world and you're going to London and Dubai and everywhere and you don't take them with you, they are not family. Because if you're taking your kids, then if you're saying this is family, then the family should go with you. So we have to do better. In a nutshell, that's
Yeah.
all it is.
Yeah.
We have to have, like I said, we've got to have empathy and compassion. Where has this person come from? What are they doing? And don't get me wrong, and I think that people misunderstand and I get pushed back. We have good employees and good employers, but rightly so, we also have bad employees and bad employers. So I also see that you
Yeah,
could do everything right, and it still works out that this person was not a good person. But that's not on you. You've
sure,
done what you were supposed to
sure.
do. You've done the best that you could do. And if this person turns out to
Right.
not be the person they were supposed to, that's not on you. That's their problem. That's not a you problem. That's a them problem.
Mangeshi, I love what you're doing. I love who you are. I mean, I think this is a huge part of our life. There is no way I could have started this business, raised 4 kids without the help of domestic workers. And I'm so blessed. We've had the same staff for 12 years almost.
Yes.
And they are integral parts of our life. And I appreciate what you said about they're not family, because that healthy boundary is good for them too,
Yes.
to not feel like, okay, I got to bring this lady to everything
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
um, but I just love what you're saying, because I think about my own life, and there's just no way I could have done anything. There's no way we would have had time as a family without the help. And we've got to do better by them. They deserve better. We can do better. It's not that hard. And I will share all of your resources in the show notes. We'll share it on social media so our listeners can get access to it.
Thank you.
Thank you for investing in something that really is the fabric of our lives. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much.
And you've given me hope. You've given me a case for hope. So before I let you go, my last question is, what's giving you hope today, Wangeshi? What's bringing you hope, filling you with hope as you look at life and all that's around you?
I'm very spiritual and I'm prayerful. And what gives me hope is every day waking up and saying that, even if I don't feel like it, and I know that today maybe it's going to be a doozy of a day, and somebody is going to tell me something that's going to upset me, and I'm going to be sad because somebody has done something to somebody else. I have the hope that we can live to fight another day, that we have to create hope within our communities. We have to do better by them. We have to, yeah, generally we have to do better by them. And I want to see our continent, there's so much our continent can do. It's not just about, domestic workers. It's about talking to each other, respecting each other, and not, not being against each other. We have to have hope for a better tomorrow. And I know it's possible.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being on Salam and Hello. I'm just so grateful that we've reconnected, and even more so that you have created resources that are going to help us do all the things you just said, create more hope, create a better place that we want to be. So thank you, Wangeshi.
Thank you so much for hosting me and for having me on your show.
So, so delighted. So, listeners, you have heard lots of ideas, lots of practical ways that you can do better, that you can create more hope for your domestic staff. I'm pretty sure that a majority of people listening to this have somebody in their life whom they are employing, that they can take something you heard today and create a better space for them. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also just email us, Lilly at Salam and Hello, S-E, just like there, with E, at and hello, or you can email us at producer at Salam Hello. We would love, love, love to hear from you. And keep listening. We've got another case for hope next week. So till we meet, peace.
Worry, that group of people trying to move along. Maybe one day we'll get onto something. Until then, we say, hold on. I know it's hard, but baby,